Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. We'll guide you through the ups and downs of note investing and teach you all about the nitty-gritty details of the business that other people won't talk about. Your host, Dan Deppen, is a former aerospace engineer and product manager who transitioned away from cubicle life to full-time note investing in 2018. Our website is www.fusionnotes.com, where you can subscribe to this podcast, comment, and find links to other information on note investing.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppen, and today I'm going to be talking about how to read a report from a loan servicer. This is something a lot of new folks struggle with. I get a lot of questions about this, and while reading a report is fairly basic on one level, it can get a little bit challenging because no two servicers display data in the same way. And some of them use some really cryptic descriptions of their columns, and they just really don't make it easy for investors to figure out what's going on. So per request, I'm going to go through some of this with you today. So first of all, what is a servicer report and what are we looking for? Well, there are a couple different kinds of reports you can generally pull out of a loan servicer's portal. So when you buy a loan, you get it boarded with a servicer. They're always going to have some kind of portal that you log into that you can look at all the information on your loans. Most of the time, what we're looking for is a pay history report to see what payments have come in on the loan, how they've been allocated, how current the loan is, things like that. There's also a lot of other information. There's generally notes on the loan and sometimes call logs where the loan servicer, if they've made contact with the borrower, either over the phone or through email, they'll document a lot of those things in there. Now, some servicers put really detailed notes on there. It makes it nice. Some of them are insanely cryptic. And are really impossible to decipher. And sometimes I have to email them to find out what on earth their notes meant. So why are these things so important? Well, it tells you the performance of the loan, right? So the pay history of the loan and the interactions the servicer has had with the borrower tell you, is this a solid performing loan? It's a weakly performing loan. Is it a sub-performer? Is it non-performer? Is it really non-performer? And so we're going to refer to these reports continuously once you own a loan to keep track of your portfolio. And then they're also very important during the due diligence process when you're buying loans. So before you even own the loan and you're considering making an offer, you've made an offer and you're doing your due diligence to determine whether or not it's okay to close, you're always going to get a copy of the pay history report. And I always ask for the servicing notes from the seller because you can go through this. This is where you're really gonna get a good idea of the performance of the loan. Some of the other things we look for in these reports are they'll show line items for escrows. So they'll show which portion of the payments were allocated to escrows. The servicer will show if they've paid property taxes. Sometimes forced place insurance is handled through the loan servicer. It'll show that as well. So there's a lot of really crucial information that you're going to pull out of these portals, both when you're in that due diligence phase and then after you own the loan. So today what I'll do is I'll go through just some of the basics of what you're looking for in these reports and things to understand, and also talk about some of the challenges. And I think the challenges will become apparent to you as I go through here. And basically, those are, as I already mentioned, no two servicers' portals are remotely the same. You know, they like to make cryptic notes. And sometimes you even run into differences between the data that's displayed, or the format of the data that's displayed in the portal when you log in, and then the format, if you say you do an export to a PDF file or an Excel, sometimes the way the numbers are the same, but the way it's displayed can be different, and that can cause additional confusion. So some of the basics that we want to get right before we get started are some of the main things we're looking for. So on the report, you'll see a number of rows and line items that could be payments that have come in from the borrower, payments that may have gone out from the loan servicer, say for taxes or insurance. And in all of these, it's going to show the actual date that that transaction occurred or the date paid. In addition to that, when the borrower makes payments, it's going to show a date due. And the date paid and the date due can sometimes be very, very different. So, for example, like let's say you see a payment on a loan and it came in October 1st, 2021, but the date due was March 1st, 2021. What that means, what that's telling you is the borrower is behind on the loan, right? If the borrower was current, let's say they had a payment due November 1st, you would expect for that payment, the date due to be November 1st, and then that date paid to be sometime in October, right? Assuming they're keeping up and paying on time. I'm guessing that's probably how you handle your mortgages and, most of the people listening to this. But when you're buying non-performing loans, that's not the case. In some cases, the date due and the date paid can be a couple years apart. And so this is just a loan that's fallen behind, but a lender's never foreclosed, or there could be a lot of reasons why there could be a big gap between the date paid and the date due, but it's important to understand the difference between those two. Now, service report's also going to show the loan balance, which is obviously very, very important, and so you'll be able to look at all the rows, see how that balance has changed over time. Sometimes there are situations where, depending on the terms of the loan and if the borrower is behind, I've had loans where the borrower was making payments, but the loan servicer was allocating all of those funds to interest, late fees, maybe lender advances, and actually none of it was going to principal. So the other thing we'll look at is the breakdown for each payment that comes in, how the pieces of that payment were allocated. That's really important to understand, because what you're ultimately going to do is enter that into your accounting system. I happen to use QuickBooks. So, and in this podcast, I'm not going to really get into accounting because that's a whole subject into and of itself. But as you receive payments from borrowers, you need to track which portions of those payments go to principal, which payments of those, or which portion of those payments go to interest, because that's going to be very important when it comes time to doing your taxes. Now, sometimes they also list what's called a record type on each row. So that's going to show what kind of transaction this was, whether it was a borrower payment, a tax payment, an insurance payment, or perhaps a credit for lender advances. And again, no two lenders use the same terminology here, and sometimes the terminology is very cryptic. So if you're new to this, it can take a little bit of work to figure out what all of those mean. And I'm going to walk through some of the different lender portals later. So if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can see, but even if you're just listening, I think I'll be able to explain everything. So payment allocation, when we're looking at, in this case, I'm looking at an export of a pay history from Madison Management. Going from left to right, they'll usually show the basic information on the loan, the borrower's name, the loan number, and then you can see all these rows here where it's showing the date paid and then the date due, and those are, and the one I'm showing now, they're actually fairly close in sync. It's a column for loan balance. You can see that steadily dropping over time, which is what you want. That kind of implies the loan is probably current. So the borrower is making payments, and some of those, portion of those payments are going to principal. And then in the report, you'll see a few columns where they break out how each loan payment was applied. So there should be one showing what was applied to principal, what was applied to interest, There's generally another one showing what was applied to escrows. Sometimes they also say to impounds. Impounds, escrows, technically the same thing. And then sometimes they have something that's called reserve. So what happens on occasion is, let's say a borrower makes extra payments. I've had borrowers pay ahead on loans. And if the borrower starts paying an extra amount, sometimes they pay an extra amount that's not a full payment. Like let's say their P&I is $400 a month, and they randomly send in a $750 extra payment. Sometimes the loan servicer isn't sure how to apply that, so they can put it to what they call a reserve and then reapply it to payments later. Sometimes they call it to suspense, which means it's just like holding thing until they allocate it later. There can also be a column showing any late fees that have been paid. So loan to loan, late fees can vary based on policies of the server and terms of the loan. Sometimes loans will specify specific loan fees or late fees. And then it'll show a record type. And in record type, this is showing whether it was a regular payment or something else. Again, this is an area where servicers like to use super cryptic terminology, and it can be a challenge to figure out. So that was one from Madison. So if you look at one from Allied Servicing Corporation, so some of the differences they do to make it a little more challenging, they've got all the same basic information in the same rows, but some of their terminology is a little different. So they have a column that just says date, and that was the actual date that the transaction happened. But then instead of due date, they have a column called IPDT. And I'm not even really sure what that's supposed to stand for. I think it's something paid due date. I don't know. But IPDT for Allied equals due date of the payment. So in this example, we've got a payment that came in on 10/14/2021, and the due date was 10/1/2021. So they're about 13, 14 days behind. They show the amount, which is the total amount for the payment, and then all the breakouts for principal, interest, escrows, etc. The other thing Allied likes to do is instead of reserve, Madison uses the term reserve for those extra funds. Allied uses suspense. And so sometimes they'll have extra funds, they'll apply it to suspense, and then they might take funds out of suspense on another payment to say make like a round payment or something like that. And then they've also got a column that just says note. That's super cryptic. So a lot of times they'll mention if it was a payment or they allocated 2 payments or it was something for late fees. And really some of the stuff might sound kind of complex, but it's really not. Like once you get used to these and you've gone through a few of them and are used to looking at them on a regular basis, you can usually figure these out pretty quickly. And if you run into any problems, just ping your loan servicer and they'll be able to show you. And then the other portal I'll show you is the one from FCI. I think FCI is probably the cleanest and the clearest. I like to refer to FCI lately as like the least bad option in loan servicing. I haven't tried BiFi yet. I'm hoping they fix all the issues. But they're showing basically the same columns. FCI has this one extra column that's nice called payment day variance. So that actually spells out in a number of days the difference between the date the payment received and the actual due date. So I've got one here that was received October 28, 2021. The date due is 3/15/2021. It just tells me I've got a 217-day variance between those payments. All right, so now I'm going to take a quick tour of some of these portals. If you're just listening, I'll be able to talk through all this. If you're watching on video, you can get an idea of what some of these look like. So within the Madison Management Portal, they've got the loan detail, which is the main page that you see. So they'll have all the general loan details, information on the payment, any information on taxes. And then, but to get the pay history, you need to go to the loan activity tab. And from the loan activity tab, you can do an export to a CSV file. So generally, if you're selling a loan, I'll do that export and send that to someone else. Day to day, managing the portfolio, I just log in and look at it. Then they've got another tab for escrow information where it shows the bills that are escrowed, and then it also shows a history of the funds going in and out of the escrow account. And then Madison has this awesome tab at the end called call logs, which you can also export. When you export their call logs, it is really cryptic. They put it, not cryptic, they put it in a tough format. But Madison's call logs overall are pretty good. What I like about it too is they share the contents of any emails back and forth from the borrower. They also put in emails back and forth from the lender. So sometimes, Madison has questions from me. I get them a response. Hey, here's what I want you to do with this loan. And because they document that, it's really easy, because if they have someone else at Madison that's helping out, say somebody's on vacation, they can go through this and they can see all of my instructions. And so the Madison call logs are pretty darn good overall. It's one of the things I like about that portal. And then we got Allied. Allied is known for having the worst portal of all of them. Apparently, a few years ago, they didn't even have a portal, and then they had like an even worse portal. So this is actually supposed to be a great improvement, but you'll find Allied really, really challenging. And if you board some loans at Allied, it's almost best just to call them and have them walk you through it. But they've got an account list where you've got to go through and select the number of the loan, but it doesn't show the address or the borrower name. So I actually maintain a separate spreadsheet for all of my loans at Allied, so that if I need to look up a loan, I can reference the loan number and then I can find it in their account list. They make it even more challenging because they don't put the account list. It's just a big list of account numbers, but they're not in numerical order. So that makes it a little bit extra challenging. And their servicing notes are the most cryptic ever. So if you use Allied, you'll see a lot of notes that say S/WBORR, which in their parlance means spoke with borrower. But it gives you no information about the contents of what they spoke with. And they have a whole ton of other acronyms that they use. They have another one that's left LMOR, you'll see, which means left message on recorder. So that's how old the systems are that they use. And then when you want to look at some of the portfolio level reports and things, it's really tricky to tease that stuff out. Allied, definitely not easy. The advantage to Allied, the reason that I've been using them is they're dirt cheap. They're $18.50 a month. So it's kind of like you're paying less. The people historically have been pretty good. Lately, that's changed, quite honestly, as they've gotten kicked out of Michigan and Pennsylvania, and they're having to transfer a lot of loans out. They're going through some challenges for sure. And then we got FCI. FCI is probably the best portal overall. So you have to go in, and it's got almost too much information, I would say. But if you go in the loan portfolio section, you can get in there and pick one of the loans, and then they have a whole bunch of tabs. So they got the loan detail, the borrower payments, notes, and some other things. Again, what I like about FCI is they're probably the least cryptic of any of them. And so that makes life a little bit easier. FCI is, of course, more expensive than some of the others. So there's never any free lunch. That's just kind of how it goes. So I hope that helped give you a little better understanding of how to interpret some of the data on these loan servicing reports and the portal. Again, it's kind of a tedious topic. When you board a loan, it's often a good idea just to reach out to the servicer, have them walk you through some of the stuff, maybe talk to other note investors who use that servicer to make sure that you understand all the information out there. But to learn more about note investing, you can always find me at fusionnotes.com or YouTube channel at youtube.com/fusionnotes. And if you really want to get in the game and start becoming active in the space and doing some of these deals yourself, you can go to the Note Launchpad online training course at notelaunchpad.com, where I've got a million videos, downloads, templates, checklists, calculators that walk you through step by step that you can just go through and use and start investing in notes quickly and getting in the game. So thanks a lot for listening and watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.